Let's get going here. All right, good afternoon. So this week's Parsha is Parshas Vayechi, the last Parsha in Sefer Bereshit. It's amazing that we're almost done the first Sefer of the Torah. And before we start Vayechi, let's just keep moving along a little bit, learning the Tzidkas HaTzadik. Last week we actually went back to the introduction, and we were going through some of Rav Tzadik's notes in his lifestyle and things that he wrote to help himself. And in the next few, I'd like to open the floor. I need some people with experience over here to really help me understand this.
Can I
So it's very interesting. Yeah,
just
go
one
ahead.
second? Someone anonymously was a sponsor of the lunch, and I want them to be recognized.
Okay, thank you to our anonymous sponsor. Is it Le'ibo Yinishmas, Zchus, or Refuah Shalema? Is it for a particular cause?
I'm not sure.
Okay, so thank you so much to our anonymous sponsor, and it's greatly appreciated. The Torah that we learn here and all the growth that we have should be a schus for you and whatever you had in mind with the sponsorship. Should have all the brachas that Torah has to offer. Okay, so we're up to number 4 in Rav Tzadok HaKayan's Ksavim, in his writings. He says something interesting. He says, Kol chalayim umisos mikri b'dei adam. He says anything that's an outside physical problem besides for what's natural. Natural is things that we're born into. We know the number one cause of death is life, right? So, I mean, that's what they found. They did studies, and they found, that's the number one cause. It's going to be a big topic of today. Yeah. And so Hashem gives us life, and He puts us into. But He says, besides 4, it says the Chazal teach us Hakol bidei shamayim. Everything's is from Hashem. We have no control. Chutz mitzina mupachim. This is a Gemara. Except for tzina mupachim, which means hot and cold, which means that we are actually responsible outside of what Hashem puts into our individual mazel and nature. We're responsible for keeping ourselves healthy. This is what Rav Tzadok writes in his notes. You got to be careful with what you eat. Okay, and again, what are we going through? The notes that Rav Tzadok was writing to himself. He says, a ben Torah, a Jew, a Torah Jew, needs to be careful with taking care of their health. He says, I'm not dealing with, God forbid, a lion eats somebody or a snake bites. We're not talking about an outside cause that Hashem, brought on a person that has nothing to do with me. It's just something that happens in my life, an experience. That's onesu. That's an inus. Chas v'sholom. There's abuse. There's things. Okay, so it's something that's outside of our control, outside of my control. But he's writing to himself that his health, HaKadosh Baruch Hu says he's responsible for. I'm responsible to do what I can to take care of my health. Okay, that's his note. That's his 4th note. Now is his 5th note. Hey, I'm gonna need some help with this. And if you have thoughts on the last one also, please feel free to share. Ein liro midavar mekudesh. Never be afraid of holy things. Ella, what should we be afraid of? Mimi shehizhir ala davar. We should be afraid of people that know to be careful around holy things. Afilu me adam mekudesh v'tamid chacham. Even if a person is a holy person, could be a great Torah scholar, be nervous. Don't be nervous. That's a better word for the translation. Don't be nervous around holy things, but be nervous around those who understand holy things.
Say that again.
Yep.
Don't be nervous from a davar mekudesh, from something which is a thing which is holy. Ella, rather, mimi, from a person shehizhir ala davar, who knows to be careful around the holy things, even a Talmid Chacham.
So how do
Those
we
are his
learn?
words. Go ahead.
So how do we learn? And we have to trust, right? The emes
Yeah.
is coming from this person.
Mm-hmm. So what does it? I think we need to understand. I don't fully grasp. What does he mean to be like fearful of them?
That's what I mean, I don't know.
Maybe it's like, I'm thinking about awe instead of fear, that yira that we always translate as fear, like scared.
Sure.
But it's more like awe. And I was just thinking about the kollel. I mean, we have a Sefer Torah in the learning center at the kollel, and nobody seems to be particularly concerned about it. You know, it's there, and
There's a Torah sitting there, right?
There's a Torah
the next
there.
room over, right?
Right. Okay, but I mean, we know that in the conference room, nobody's going to do anything. But like when Rabbi Frank walks in, it's a different feeling than the Torah that's just kind of sitting there. I mean, because he's a living,
Very
breathing.
Very
He's a living, breathing Torah.
Let me expand. There's a very interesting Gemara in Tractate Makos. The Gemara says, in Aramaic, the words they use are Hani Tipshoi, these fools. Talks about foolish people. The Gemara says, look at these fools, Shemekame, for they stand up Lefnei Sefer Torah, in front of a Torah scroll. When a Torah scroll comes by, they stand up. However, they don't stand up when a scholar walks by. And the Gemara says it's foolish. So what does it mean it's foolish? Foolish means we're making a terrible mistake. And we kind of should know a little better. Okay? So what does that mean? So I once heard from my brother-in-law, Rabbi Yaakov Friedman, who has a yeshiva in Eretz Yisrael. He said, forgot who he was quoting, that the reason why the Gemara calls a person like that foolish is because it shows that we don't grasp what Torah is and what a Torah person is. How so? As we've explained previously, the purpose of mankind is not to learn Torah. The purpose of Torah is for mankind. And therefore, it's foolish to stand up to respect a Sefer Torah, but don't respect somebody who's making use of the purpose of a Sefer Torah. Because that's really the ultimate pinnacle of creation. Sefer Torah, a person who makes use of that, and that's the purpose of the Sefer Torah, how much more so should you stand up? And that's a little bit of an expansion, kind of a proof to what you're saying. So according to your understanding, it's letting us know, don't be in awe strictly to the items of holiness. Very interesting. But be in awe of those that utilize its purpose. Beautiful, very good. Yeah.
Okay. The Rav used the word respect. So there's kuvod and there's respect. So kuvod is something you're supposed to give to Torah, Rabbanim, whatever. You're supposed to give kuvod no matter what. But respect is something else.
How do you translate respect?
Respect is something that should be earned. Or
Are you talking like an American millennial, or how are you asking the question?
Well, I'm just saying, if here's a person you're supposed to give kuvod to, you have to give them respect too? I mean, respect is something that should be earned, or you're supposed to do that also no matter what?
You should be mechabed as habrios. We're supposed to honor all of Hashem's creation. The reason why I made that statement about whether you're saying respect like a millennial is because I'm like at the upper edge of that area, I believe. I don't know where you get into that, but I could just say that in the current American terms, respect does not mean the respect that we know of. Respect means accept.
Oh.
It's a big phrase nowadays is you have to respect people's opinions. No, you don't. No, you don't. Not in Judaism. You have to accept people's opinions, but I can't respect it if it's wrong. When we know in Yiddishkeit that to respect something means I really respect you. Like you're on a pedestal.
Right.
There's something there, and I look up to it. I'm going to emulate that.
But that's kavod.
That's kavod, and that's the respect we know of. In the American society, what we're used to now is when they say to respect me, respect my lifestyle, respect my opinion, but since unfortunately we don't really know how to respect each other in our society, it's more of acceptance. What the people mean is I can accept your opinion, and I can accept that you have an opinion, and it's a free world. But I can't respect it, because to me, respect means I look up to it. It's and that's part of covet. That's part of covet as well. Okay, but interesting. I think you do have to respect, at least give the benefit of the doubt, be down the kapsulas until people have lost it. I would say there's actually a fascinating piece of advice that the Gemara gives us. The Gemara says when you meet a new person, there's two words: kabdeyu v'chashteyu. You're supposed to, you don't know who they are. Kabdeyu, you respect them, v'chashteyu, and suspect them.
Oh.
So at the same time, and it's not a hypocrisy. You have to respect them. I trust that you're a good person, but I'm not giving you my PIN number to my bank account. Right? There's respect and suspect. Kabdeyu v'chashteyu. That's what Chazal say. And until a person earns it, you don't have, just because respect doesn't mean that it's an all-out thing, but you're respecting them as a Tzelem Elokim. They're a piece of Hashem. I respect what you stand for and who you are, but at the same time, respecting doesn't mean to go all in and be naive. Okay, interesting. Okay, so all right. Any other thoughts on being nervous around a person who's careful around holiness more than the holiness itself? Very interesting.
Can I just ask a question on the previous one?
Yeah.
Hey, there's no connection between the one and the other, correct?
Correct.
No.
Yeah, these are. We're going through 13 notes that he wrote to himself about the
So
advice for
I
life.
don't
Yeah.
understand that we're responsible for keeping ourselves healthy. Does he mean that, like, I understand you've got to eat healthy and exercise, and is that basically what he's talking about?
Yeah, and noticing, since Chazal teach us, Chazal do say, and perhaps this is how I'm taking what he wants to teach himself and remind himself, is that there's a point within being one with Hashem where you can't just put everything on Hashem. You can't just, a person cannot just say, Hashem will take care of it.
So you've got to take responsibility.
You got to take responsibility on your health. That is what Hashem told us we need to do in our relationship. This I'm leaving to you. Your mazel and the family and the outside circumstances, Hashem says, I'm going to throw that at you, give you those tests. That's really out of your control. But to take care of your own health and safety in a natural way, that's your responsibility. You need to do that. That's it. Yeah.
Well, I think it's realizing that this is a holy vessel for the neshama. Your body is a holy vessel. It's holy, so that you
Very good.
commanded to take care of it.
Right. Very good. The Gemara tells us about Hillel. Hillel, when he was going to the bathhouse, one of his Talmidim asked, "Say, Rebbe, where are you going?" He says, I'm going to wash off the statue of Hashem. Because since each person's made in the image of God, he says, by me taking care of my hygiene, I'm doing a mitzvah. I'm taking care of Hashem's creation. So whenever we shower, we're doing a mitzvah, right? It's Hashem's body. We say our neshama is deposited by us, our bodies are deposited by us. So everything we do is a mitzvah. It's, when a person brushes their teeth, flosses their teeth, right? Showers, So when we take care of our hygiene, it's a mitzvah. Hashem commands us. This is something we need to do, and maybe one of the only things that's really in our hand outside of our choice is this. Yeah.
Just I thought of another take on being nervous around
Yeah.
holy things. So, the holy things or holy people?
It says be nervous around holy people who are in awe or in fear of holiness,
So
as opposed to the holiness itself.
So are those people also the ones who can twist? If they know the Torah, you can use it the way you want to.
I mean, they have Das Torah.
Right.
They understand what Torah wants. Perhaps he doesn't go so far to say that, because I'm going to suggest, and I don't know if this is true, perhaps you can be in this category and not really have so much Torah knowledge. I would venture to say that most of our great-great-grandparents, okay, who let's assume they lived late 1700s, early 1800s, okay, they may not have, I would be confident to say, they probably did not have as much Torah information as any of us have. They didn't have the printing press. They didn't have Chumashim printed out, art scrolls, Sidurim, but they feared holy things. They were Yidden, right? They were real Yidden, and it's so I don't know. Does it mean that they had Das Torah? I don't know, but they were certainly in tune with living a life with Hakadosh Baruch Hu. Okay, let's get on to our Parshas Vayechi, and that conversation is a very interesting segue into our Parsha, talking about life. And here we go. Parshas Vayechi begins. Last Parsha again in the book of Rishon. Vayechi Yaakov be'eretz Mitzrayim. Yaakov lived in the land of Egypt, Shva Esrei Shana, for 17 years. Okay, a little bit of history. Yaakov passes away at the age of 147, and the last 17 years of his life he lived in Egypt. So he went down to Egypt at the age of 130. Now it says Vayechi Yaakov. Yaakov lived. The commentators let us know, why doesn't it just say Yaakov was in the land of Egypt for 17 years before he died? Letting us know that he lived. It was the last 17 years of his life, but he was doing whatever he can to live life to its fullest. That's what Yaakov was doing. Now, interestingly, Rav Lazer Sorotskin, there's a set of Chumashim we have here on the shelf called Aznayim LaTorah. Beautiful set of Chumash. It's only in Hebrew. I don't know if they came out with it in English. A lot of beautiful explanations. It also leads you to all the Gemaras where you could find the Psukim listed. It's a great cheat sheet for rabbis. You want to know, if you learn a pasuk and you want to know where all the Gemaras talk about it. So you know where to, yank it off the shelf. All right, there's. I can quote 8 Gemaras and sound smart. Now we're good to go. You have to know where the cheat sheets are. So Liz Sorotskin points out that there's 2 parshios in the Torah that are called life. Vayechi, the life of Yaakov, and Chaye Sarah, the life of Sarah. There's 2 parshios that have life. And he points out, guess what? They don't talk about the person's life. They talk about their death. Vayechi, right? Chaye Sarah, these were the years of Sarah's life, and Sarah passed away. And these were the years of Yaakov's life, and Yaakov passed away. Why specifically do the 2 parshios that have the word life in it refer to death? That's his question. And he makes an amazing, amazing point. And he says, you know what the Torah is teaching me? The Torah is teaching me that in the life of a Jew, there's no such thing as death. There's life in 2 different rooms. And when we look at the lives of our matriarchs, specifically Sarah, and patriarchs, specifically Yaakov, the sages teach us Yaakov Avinu lo meis, he never died. He was able to fuse his soul with his body. So it's an amazing piece of Chazal. But be it as it may, they never died. They went from living here to Vayechi to living somewhere else. That's all that happened. And interestingly, we've spoken this, those who I've been zeicha to learn Pirkei Avos with, we've mentioned a number of times that the Hebrew word for death actually is nifter. What does nifter mean? Nifter means a Jewish concept, right? To pass. What do you mean to pass? What does it mean that I passed on? What it means is I passed from one place, I went to another place. That's
So you're saying we just change addresses
it's a total change of address.
with a new birthday.
With a new birthday. Interestingly, according to, I'm trying to remember where I saw this parable. I've shared it a number of times. It's not for whatever reason, I think it's the Malbim, but I may be wrong. I need to look this up again in my notes. Malbim brings a parable. He says there's 2 says there's twins inside of a mother's womb. And they're having a theological debate. One twin says, listen, brother, enjoy the food we're getting in here, because out there, it's done. It's over. Another brother says, no, I'm telling you, there's a whole world out there. It's amazing. There's beaches, there's palm trees, there's nice people, there's good food, the colors, it's amazing. And they're sitting inside the sack, inside the mother. And brother number one's like, I don't know what you're talking about, but I ain't believing it till I see it. I'm telling you, it's this 9 months and we're done. The other one's like, no, and they're fighting for 9 months. Okay. Finally, one day, all of a sudden, there's a little bit of muscle contraction, and brother number two pops out. And brother number one is inside, and he hears screams. And he's like, oh man, I knew it. I told him he should just relax over here. You know what I mean? Like that. What doesn't he understand? That the shouts on the other side are shouts of Mazel Tov. A baby was just born into this beautiful world. That's the noise that he heard. What's the parable? The same thing is true with this world and the next world. Right? So it's just us, just here, just there. And people who know say, I'm telling you, there's another room we live in that's magical. It's incredible. And the person moves on to the next world. And everybody left here is like, oh man. And that person, they hear shouts of Mazel Tov. Yeah? Their parents are coming to greet them. The grandparent, uncle, whoever went before them is there shouting Mazel Tov. It's the same thing. And some of us will have heard this from me a number of times. It's a beautiful thought. I think about this all the time. That my father, Zechron L'Bracha, shared with me after he had a stroke, and I was walking to shul with him, and he was musing, and he says, I don't understand. I'm 18. Why doesn't my hand work the way it used to? He was musing. Why is it? And I was like, I don't know, Tal. If you're 18, I hear your question. What's the deal? He says, I'll tell you, Pshat. He says, I'll tell you the reason. He says, because only things that end age. Age is when you go from one stage to another stage. So things that don't last, age. He says, my body's not going to last, so it ages. But I'm stuck inside this. I'm still 18. That's how I can be 18 and my body's just not moving as fast. Because we don't really die. We don't age. Who we really are, our bodies age, because our bodies aren't here forever. But we who are here forever, just with a change of address, after whatever allotted time we have, we're 18 in the body of a 50, 60, 70, 90, 100, 110, 120-year-old. And we're sitting here thinking what happened? And the answer is nothing. That's why we still feel vibrant, because there's no point on aging. Age doesn't mean anything, because we really, as a neshama, we're a piece of Hashem. We can't end. We can't die. We're a chelik elikam imal. We're part of godliness. And this, says Rav Zalman Sorotzkin, it's a beautiful thought, is why the parshios of death are called life, to teach us that a neshama is always alive. It's always around, and it's just a matter of what address we're in.
It's
Beautiful
a good
idea.
song too.
It's a good song. What's the song?
Malachi.
Oh,
By
coming down here.
By
Come down to this
Amy
world.
Rock-
Yeah. About coming down to this world.
About the two babies
The
fighting in the womb.
Well, he has the neshama talking to the malach. He doesn't want to come down, and the malach shows him all the good he could do.
Right.
Right? Yeah. Okay. So, Vayechi Yaakov beretz Mitzrayim again. So Yaakov lived in Egypt for 17 years. Now listen to this. Pasuk Chavtes, verse 2. Vayikrevu Yemei Yisrael Lamos. The days of Yaakov's life came close to die. Fascinating expression. This is the second pasuk of the parsha. The days of Yisrael came close to die. So he calls his son Yosef and he says, please do me a favor, I don't want to be buried in Mitzrayim. Let's focus on these words for a moment. The days of Yisrael came close to die. What does it mean they came together? So there's, I'll introduce this with a beautiful, well-known poem from a poet by the name of Linda Ellis called The Dash. Many of you are probably familiar with it, where she speaks about that when you go to a cemetery, so you have the birth year and the year of Nifter, the year of death, right? Year of passing. And what's in between? A dash. What's the most important thing? The dash. Right? The dash that's all the time. That's the life. The dash is all about the life. So she writes like this. She says, I'll just read this through quickly, it's not that long. I read of a man who stood to speak at the funeral of a friend. He referred to the dates from beginning to end. He noted, first came the date of birth, and spoke of the following date with tears. But he said what matters most was the dash between those years, because that dash represents all the time that she spent on earth, and now only those who loved her know what that little line is worth. What a beautiful introduction. So here's the poem. It matters not how much we own, the cars, the house, the cash. What matters is how we live and love and how we spend our dash. So think about this long and hard. Are there things you would like to change? For you never know how much time is left that can still be rearranged. If we would just slow down enough to consider what is true and real and always try to understand the way people feel. Be less quick to anger, show appreciation more, love the people in our lives like we have never loved before. If we treat each other with respect and more often wear a smile, remember this special dash might only last a little while. So when your eulogy is being read and your life's actions are rehashed, would you be proud of the things they say about how you spent your dash? It's a beautiful poem, right? A beautiful thing. And it's I believe this poem explains this pasuk, and I'm going to prove it, not for myself, but from what Chazal teach us. Chazal say the following: when a person passes, so the days that we utilized join us in front of Hashem. So you can have somebody who lived till 120, and they come up to Hashem, and they are 3 days old, because they spent 3 days of time appropriately or productively in their life. And you could have somebody who passed away young, 18 years old, and they're 18 years old when they stand up in front of the heavenly court because they used their time productively. Okay? They were kind, they were nice, they brought good values, whatever. But Yikruhu Yemei Yisrael Lamos means that all of the days of Yaakov's life joined him in front of the heavenly court. A person's days accompany us. Our time accompanies us on that day. Okay? So that's what it means outside of context. In context, it means the days were coming close, means he realized that his time living at this address in this world was coming close for his passing. So what does he do? Vayikra Livno Yosef. He calls his son Yosef. Vayomer Lo, and he says to Yosef, do me a favor, place your hand under my thigh, make an oath, do for me chesed v'emes, I'll not take ready to be Mitzrayim, do not bury me in Egypt. Why did he call Yosef? Says Rashi, why did he ask Yosef to bury him in the Ma'aras HaMachpelah? Why doesn't he ask his other kids? Yosef's number 11 out of 12. Right? So we'll say, well, what type of question is that? He's the leader of Egypt. He can do what he wants. Right? Rashi says that's the right answer. But there's a message in that. And here's the message in that. It's not appropriate by Hashem's standards, which decides appropriateness. Okay? It's not appropriate to ask people for favors that they are not in position to follow through. You ever been asked to do something that was a totally inappropriate request? Right? It's like, Why? And now I'm putting it to an uncomfortable position to have to either say no or whatever. The Torah is telling me, Rashi points this out. You can ask favors of people, you can ask, but make sure that if you ever make a request, you're not asking people to do something that's not fair to ask them to do.
Or they're not capable of
But
doing
they're not capable of doing. That means it's not fair, right? It's not fair. It's not a fair place to put someone there. That's what Rashi says. Now, Rav Itzala of Alozhin says the following. He makes a beautiful point. I just came across this a few days ago, and I was like, why didn't I ever catch that? It's stunning. He adds on to Rashi, and he says, think about it. What's going to be Yaakov's request? To be buried in the Maras HaMachpelah. To be buried with the couples, Adam and Chava, right? Adam and Eve are buried there. Avram and Sarah, Yitzchak and Rivka, Leah is already buried there, and Yaakov's asking to be buried there. Usually, where does a child bury a parent? If I'm a child, and my mother passed away, and now my father passes away, where am I naturally going to want my father to be buried? Near my mother.
Yeah.
That's natural.
Which
Now,
Which one?
here's the problem. Here's the problem. Yosef's number 11 out of 12. But he's the first brother who can throw a fuss. Because every other brother would naturally take Yaakov to the land of Canaan because that's where their mother was buried. Okay, now Leah had 6 sons, so Reuven, Shimon, Levi, Yehudi, Issachar, Zevulun, right? They're all going to naturally be Dan, Naphtali, Gad, and Asher. Those 4 who were the sons of Bilhah and Zilpah, they understood, that even the Torah, they kind of like were the secondary wives, but Leah and Rachel were the primary wives. So, yeah, says Rav Itzla Petersburg, he says, notice that Yaakov's understanding of the situation, not only does he ask Yosef because Yosef had the ability, but he spoke to the one who may not be in agreement with that decision. Which is an important message in life, that when you're going to speak and you want to give over a message and create something, make sure you go to the proper place for that. In a humorous way. Funny and not funny. It's only humorous because it's not officially true. Okay? But there's a Hasidic Rebbe who passed away. And his 2 sons get into a fight. Who should be the next Rebbe? Both of them decide, I should be the next Rebbe. And everyone's got thousands of Hasidim taking their sides. My Rebbe, big machlekes. Okay. Finally, this goes on for 3 years. One day there's a knock on the door. And brother number 2 opens the door. Brother number 1 standing there. And brother number 1 says, my dear brother, machlekes is over. We can have shalom. He says, amazing shalom. What happened? What happened? I'm so happy. He says, last night, Dad came to me in a dream. And he said, I should be the Rebbe. You hear this? Dad told me. So brother number 2 looks at him and he says, listen, sweetie pie. If Dad wanted you to be the Rebbe, he would come to me in a dream.
That's right.
He would tell me that you should be the Rebbe. Not coming to you in a dream. Right? You have to know how to accomplish what you want to accomplish. Okay? And by the way, this thought process is the difference between Judaism and every other religion. It's fascinating. There's a book which I came across this when it was published in the year 2000. I'm sure it's more updated. There's a book called the Macmillan Reference on World Religions, put out by Christian missionaries. In the year 2000, they listed over 4,000 religions in the world. It's a whole list of various religions. And in this book, they write that the only religion in the world that claims that Hashem appeared to them as a nation, as a people, is Judaism. Right? Even when God changed his mind, which is their claim, the Muslims and Christians believe in Har Sinai. Unfortunately, more than some of our Jewish brothers and sisters. They believe in Har Sinai because it's a historical event. 3 million people witnessed it. You can't say it didn't happen. They just say later on there were sins and God changed his mind. And then Hashem appeared to some individuals, right? Either one person up to 5 people. But you can't really start a false claim with more than a small group. It's not possible to claim doesn't take off, because it won't take off the ground. People just say, no, Hashem never appeared to me, right? Which is interesting. In the Torah, Hashem says, you saw me appear to all of you, and we all accepted it, right? We're like, oh yeah. And as I think Rabbi Zev Leff was speaking about this is where I heard this from. He says Jews have been accused of being a lot of things. One of the things we have not been accused of is being stupid, right? He's like, we're not going to take a Torah that says I've come to you and appeared to you, be like, yeah, that happened. We're not going to do that. It's not going to. So this concept is of Yaakov going to Yosef in particular is a very, not only Jewish, a very important path that we need to think about when we want things to get done, is not always take the easiest path, but to take the path that's smartest. Because the easiest thing for Yaakov to do is just go to the older brothers, and they're naturally going to want to do bring them Mars Macmillan. That's their nature. But that could lead to a machloka. So instead, Yaakov circumvents all this with his wisdom, and instead he goes straight to Yosef. Okay, so Yisrael's days are coming together, and he says, "Please do kindness for me." What does he ask for? Al natik v'reini b'Mitzrayim, and I need help over here. He says, "Please don't bury me in Egypt." Why doesn't he want to be buried in Egypt? Says Rashi, 3 reasons. Reason number 1 is because the earth in Egypt is going to turn to lice. He knew with prophecy, it's going to turn to lice by the 3rd plague. And I don't want my body there when the land is turned to lice. I don't understand that. I don't get it. I need help. I have 2 big questions on this. First of all, so what? So what? What's the difference? I mean, come on. Yeah, you're not there anyway. No, whatever. That was my temporary suitcase. And now the earth is, it's going to be years later. Come on. Number 1. Question number 2 might even be a better question. There was no lice in the city of Goshen. So it has to be buried in Goshen. If you're nervous about the lice, not all of Egypt is going to have lice. The area where the Jews lived, there was no lice. It's question number 2. Okay. I want to give the other 2 reasons, and then I need help if anybody has thoughts on number 1. The other 2 I get. Number 1 is because of the lice. Number 2 is, and this is, by the way, this Rashi, quoting the Gemara as the source for this, of being buried inside the land of Eretz Yisrael. He says, another reason why I want to be buried in Israel is because when it comes the time for Tchias HaMesim, when the Olam Haba and Olam Hazeh are going to fuse together and people are going to come back to life, everybody's going to come back to life in the land of Israel. And anybody buried outside the land of Israel will roll in underground tunnels. So it's going to take longer. It'll take longer. He wants to be able to be Zeicha, to be back in Eretz Yisrael faster. So he doesn't want to have to go through that ordeal. He says, therefore, I want to be buried in Eretz Yisrael. My parents, by the way, wanted to be buried. They wanted to live in Eretz Yisrael. They wanted to be buried in Eretz Yisrael, and we found in my mother's pocketbook all the pros and cons of where to. And ultimately, my parents decided to be buried in Baltimore because Rabbi Hopfer, who they went to for a psak, he's a rav of the Yekisha community of Glen Avenue in Baltimore. He told my parents, he said, the last chesed you could do for your family is not make them schlep to Eretz Yisrael on your yahrzeit. That was the thing. He says, do chesed for your family. All right. You'll be born again a few minutes later. He said, you can do chesed to your family. Okay, fine. So that's reason number 2. Okay. And reason number 3 is the Shalo Yasuni Mitzrayim Avodah Zarah. I don't want the Egyptians turning me into a pagan worship. Now, the reason for this was that, which actually answers question number 2 about Goshen. The second 2 reasons knock off both of my questions, right? Because in the second 2 questions, you could say, okay, she wants to, wants to just be buried there, to have the Tchias HaMesim there. And over here as well, Yaakov Avinu, when he came down to Egypt, if we recall, there was a dream of 7 years of plenty followed by 7 years of famine. Yaakov came down after 2 years of famine, and the famine stopped. Now, all of Egypt knew there was supposed to be 7 years. So they credited him with stopping the famine, his presence in the land. So Yaakov was concerned that once he's buried, they're going to start coming to his tomb and say that really it's not Hashem, really it's Yaakov Avinu. Now this logic also, to keep this shear going, is the reason why he wouldn't do it in Goshen. Because imagine if Yaakov would be buried in Goshen, and there was no lice in Goshen, what are the Egyptians going to say? It's not God, it's the merit of this human being being buried there that's protecting the whole city. So those, Yaakov wanted to get around any potential lack of Kiddush Hashem. Right? Again, thinking ahead, making sure that everything falls into place. But the first reason I really don't have a good shot in, that it says the earth is going to turn to lice. It's going to be a long time later, and I'm not sure. I haven't seen yet. Mirz Hashem, I'll keep studying this. But if anybody has a thought about this lice issue, what's the big deal? Yeah.
It's not the lice issue. The earth in Israel continues to purify you. That's why when we do a tahara, we take the earth and we put it all around the we put it all around the mace to substitute, because we're here in the United States. But if you're in Israel, that is part of the purification.
So I get that, but then it should have nothing to do with the lice.
Nothing.
It should have to do with the land of Israel. It should have to do with, okay. But over here, Rashi says because of that plague. So just
It's just a
pretty interesting Rashi.
It's a desecration of the body for something to destroy it. That's actually going to be used to destroy the Egyptians also.
Okay. It says, Yaakov says, "Merachshin tachas gufi." They're going to be around my body. He's not even concerned that they're going to actually do anything to him. He's concerned that they're going to be around him. Tzaddikim, their bodies stay fresh.
But it's still tummy. It's still
maybe. I don't know.
That tumor around
Pure.
you.
Interesting. Okay, I don't want to end this year with that. That's a little too too heavy for me. So we'll end with one more vart a little bit later on the parsha. But just a beautiful idea and an important message from our parsha, which is that this parsha gives us the blessings that Yaakov's passing away. He gives the blessings to all of the tribes. Okay. He also elevates Ephraim and Manasseh. Ephraim and Manasseh, which are the sons of Yosef, and he gives them a blessing. Yisimcha lekim Ephraim v'chem Manasseh. What was so special about Ephraim and Manasseh? So one reason given is that usually it's what we call Yeridas Hadoros. Usually there's, as the generations move, there's a loss of ethics and values, and that's called Yeridas Hadoros. Ephraim and Manasseh, in the culture of Egypt, actually elevated themselves to the level of the previous generation. They became tribes. Okay? This is one message why people give their children a blessing, referring to Ephraim and Manasseh, because the thought process behind it is that you should keep the values of the previous generation, not get turned away. However, there's a beautiful thought by the Bnei Yissaschar, who says that one of the messages in this bracha is that we know that the story where Yaakov switched his hands, right? He put the right hand on the younger one and the left hand on the older one, and he points out, he says that when Yaakov did this, Yosef said to his father, your hand's on the wrong head. You got to switch your hands. Says the Bnei Yissaschar, but from the kids themselves, you don't hear a peep. It's not. You'd think the older one's like, it's not fair, right? It's not fair. I should get the right hand. And even after Yaakov explains himself that the younger one's going to be greater than the older one, which is why he changed his hand, you still don't hear a peep. They're both standing there. They say, listen, whatever my lot is, whatever blessing I get, this is what Hashem. This is where Hashem wants me to be, and Hashem wants me to do. And where did they learn this? Kids don't just pick up on this. Where did they get this from? They got it from Yosef. How so? Because we learned in last week's parsha. Yosef says, I am Yosef, your brother. Even though you treated me wrong and I've been hurt, I still consider myself to be your brother. and Hashem sent me down here to be the ruler of Egypt. Everything is, my emunah bitachon. Everything is from Hakadosh Baruch Hu, and it doesn't matter. So what's the message? What message did the children take in? And what's the message the Torah is stressing to us? That Yosef was hurt by the brothers. Big time. Okay? These two brothers are being hurt, so to speak, in quotations, by Yaakov switching it. At least the older one is. Okay? But what happens? The Torah is teaching us a very important message, which is, we'll end with this, treat everyone around us with our ethics and not theirs. Very often in life, we're put into situations where people who are not to our standards of morals, midos, they do things to us. And Hashem put into our nature to respond in kind. And the Torah is letting us know the way to treat people from Yosef and from these boys. Important message. Treat people with our ethics as opposed to lowering ourselves to treat them with their ethics. We'll hold it here for today. Yeshua Koach.
Thank you.